minor. Last lesson we learned how to create chord progressions using power chords, or fifths. Fifths have no tonality, meaning they are not major or minor. That's why we're going to learn how to play a minor chord shape and a major chord shape. We're going to start with the 5th fret of low E. We're going to make that note major. To do that, we're going to start with our middle finger on that note, 5th fret of the low E string. Our next note is going to be 1 fret down and 1 string to the floor. We're going to use our pointer finger for that. That's going to be the 4th fret of the A string, pointer finger. So to make a note major, you start with your middle finger, in this case 5th fret of low E. Our next note is going to be 1 fret down and 1 string to the floor, with our pointer finger on the 4th fret of the A string. This is the simplest way to play a major chord. If we were turning the 7th fret of the E string into a major chord, we would start with our middle finger on the 7th fret of low E. From there, our next note is going to be 1 fret down and 1 string to the floor with our pointer finger. 6th fret of the A string with our pointer, and 7th fret on low E with our middle finger. And again, make sure you can play both notes at the same time. To play a minor chord shape, we're going to start with our ring finger on the 5th fret of low E. Our next note is going to be 2 frets down and 1 string to the floor. 5th fret on low E was our starting point. 2 frets down and a string up from that point is our note that is going to make our minor chord complete. So you start 2 frets down, 1 string to the floor, and that gives you a minor chord shape. Make sure you can play both at the same time. Your ring finger may interfere, so be careful. Make sure you play on your fingertip a bit. To turn the 7th fret of low E into a minor chord, we start with our ring finger. Again, 2 frets down, 1 string to the floor is our next note that we're going to add to our starting note. That's going to be the 7th fret of low E. 2 frets down, 1 string to the floor is going to be the 5th fret of the A string. We have just made the 7th fret of low E minor. Next, we're going to practice moving our new chords. We're going to start on the 5th fret of the low E string, and we're going to make that note major by going down a fret and a string to the floor. That's where we're going to start. We're going to play that note 2 times before switching to our next chord, which is going to take place on the A string, 5th fret, middle finger. We're going to make that note major by going 1 fret down and 1 fret, 1 string to the floor. All we're really doing is, from our first chord, we're just changing strings. Both fingers are moving 1 string to the floor. First chord, 5th fret of low E, 4th fret of A. We're moving that to the 5th fret of A and the 4th fret of D. 1 string over, same frets. The next chord we're going to add is the 7th fret of the A string, middle finger. We're going to make that note major as well, which is going to be 1 fret down, 1 string to the floor, the 6th fret of the D string. 7 on A, 6 on D, middle on A, pointer on D. So each chord is going to be played 2 times. We're going to start on our first chord, switch, slide up to the 7th fret, and then we're going to slide back down to the 5th fret on the A string and the 4th fret on the D string. So to complete that exercise, repeat. We're going to do the same thing in the minor scale. Starting on the 5th fret of low E, making our minor chord shape, 2 frets down, 1 string to the floor. That's our first chord in this exercise, which will be played twice. Both fingers are going to move 1 string to the floor, maintaining the minor chord shape. We're going to the A string, 5th fret with our ring, D string, 3rd fret with our pointer finger. So it's just starting point, low E, and we're shifting to the A string with our ring finger, and pointer's going to the D string. From there we're sliding up 2 frets, staying on the same 2 strings. That's going to be the 7th fret of A and the 5th fret of the D string. So each chord is going to be played twice. Back to our 5th fret on the A string. So we're going to play our first chord twice, switch twice there, slide up twice, and then we're sliding back down to the 5th fret of the A string and the 3rd fret of the D string to finish off our exercise. So the whole thing is first chord, switch, slide up, slide right back to where you were, and then repeat. Practicing the basic major and minor chord shapes. As long as you know what intervals are being used in a chord progression, you'll know whether those intervals should be major or minor based on a simple pattern. Putting intervals into groups reveals our simple harmony pattern. The first group is chords 1, 4, and 5. They are the same tonality as the key from which your chord progression came from. For example, if you make a minor chord progression, chords number 1, 4, and 5 would be minor. In the major key, chord number 1, 4, and 5 would be major. Chords 1, 4, and 5 in a key are the same tonality as that key. So if you make a major chord progression and you use 1, 4, or 5, those chords would all be major. If you're in the minor key and you make a minor chord progression, chords 1, 4, and 5 would be minor chords. The next interval group is 3, 6, and 7. Those intervals are the opposite tonality as the key from which your chord progression was made. So if you make a minor chord progression, chords 3, 6, and 7 would be major chords. They are the opposite of the key. If you were in the major scale and you want to make a chord progression using 3, 6, or 7, those chords would be minor. 3, 6, and 7 are the opposite tonality of the key from which your progression was made. 2 chord is minor in both keys. So in both major and minor chord progressions, the 2 chord is minor. We're going to play every chord in the major and minor key, starting with the minor scale. The 1 chord in the minor scale is going to be minor because 1 follows the key. 1 is the same tonality as the key from which the progression was formed. So 1 is going to be minor in the minor scale. To do that, we're going to start on the 5th fret of low E, which is 1. We're going to go down 2 frets and then 1 string to the floor to find our higher note. Together, that makes our 1 chord minor. 2 chord is minor in both keys. So in both major and minor chord progressions, the 2 chord is minor. 2 begins on the 7th fret of the E string. So to make that minor, we begin with our 3rd finger, go down 2 frets, 1 string to the floor for our top note. Together, we have 7 on E, 5 on A to make our 2 chord. Minor 2 chord. So 1 is minor, 2 is minor. The 3 chord begins on the 8th fret of low E string. Chords 3, 6, and 7 are the opposite tonality as the key from which the progression was made. In this case, we're in the minor scale, so 3 is going to be the opposite of that, making it major. 1, 2, 3. To make the 8th fret of the low E string major, we start with our middle finger, go down 1 fret, 1 string to the floor to the A string, 7th fret. That is our 3 chord in this key. The 4th position in the minor key is going to be minor because 1, 4, and 5 are the same as the key. So to make the 5th fret of the A string minor, I start with my ring finger on the 5th fret, drop 2 frets, and then drop 1 string to the floor. Adding that to my ring finger on the 5th fret makes the minor 4 chord. Our next chord is 5. The 5th position in the minor scale is minor because 5 is the same tonality as the progression key. To make the 5th chord minor, we start with our ring finger on the 7th fret of A, which is where the 5 starts. Drop 2 frets, 1 string to the floor. We've just made the 7th fret of A string minor, which is our 5 chord. 6 is our next chord. 3, 6, and 7 are the opposite tonality of the progression key. So the 6 is also going to be major. To make that 8th fret of the A string major, we drop 1 fret and then 1 string to the floor. So 6th chord is 8 on E, 6th chord is 8 on A and 7 on D. The last note in the scale is the 3rd fret of the low E string, the 7th and final note of the scale. 7, like 6 and 3, is going to be the opposite tonality of the key. 7 is going to be major. So to make that 3rd fret major, drop 1 fret and then 1 string to the floor will give us our major shape. So 1 is minor, 2 is minor, 3 is major, 4 minor, 5 is minor, 6 is major, 7 is major, 1 is minor. So we've played every chord in the minor key. We're going to do the same in the major scale. To start off, we start on 1. 1 in the major scale is going to be major because 1, 4, and 5 are the same tonality as the progression key. In our example progression, 1 begins on the 5th fret of low E. To make that note major, we would start and then go down 1 fret and 1 string to the floor will be the note we want to add to complete our major 1 chord. 2 begins on the 7th fret of low E, and 2 chord is minor in both keys. 2 is minor, so to make the 7th fret minor, down 2 frets, 1 string to the floor. The 3 chord is the opposite tonality of the progression key. So that's going to be the 4th fret of the A string is where 3 begins. To make that note minor, we have to add a note that is 2 frets down, 1 string to the floor. 2nd fret of the D string with your pointer finger. 4 on A, 2 on D. Our 4 chord is going to be major because 4 is the same tonality as 1, or same tonality as the key. 5 is going to be major in the major scale because 1, 4, and 5 are the same tonality as the key, the progression key. Next we have the 6th chord, which takes place on the 2nd fret of low E. The 6th chord is the opposite tonality of the progression key, making it minor. To make this 2nd fret of low E minor, we start with our ring finger. We go down 2 frets, which is actually going to mean open, fret 0. That's going to happen 1 string to the floor on the A string. So your 6th chord in this key is going to be the 2nd fret of low E, open A string. Interval 7 takes place on the 4th fret of low E and is going to be minor because 7 is the opposite tonality of the key. 3, 6, and 7 are the opposite tonality of the progression key. Basically the key from which the progression was formed. So 7 is going going to be minor. To do that, we start on the 4th fret of low E, drop 2 frets, 1 string to the floor will give us our completed chord. And that's it. 1 chord is major, 2 chord is minor, 3 chord is minor, 4 chord is major, 5 chord is major, 6 chord is minor, 7 chord is minor, and then we're back to 1, which is major. Knowing when to play our major chord shape and our minor chord shape depends on the interval and key. That's why it's best to start off with a power chord progression to establish our intervals. From there, we can determine whether each power chord should be replaced with a major or minor chord shape. Our example power chord progression is going to be minor 1, 3, 4, 6. 1 chord starts on the 5th fret. We're going to make it a power chord by going 2 frets up and a string to the floor. 3 chord is on the 8th fret. 4 chord is on the 5th fret of the A string. And then the 6 chord is on the 8th fret of the A string. So 1, 3, 4, 6. Now that we have our progression, we can replace each power chord with either a major shape or a minor shape, depending on that interval. 1 chord in the minor scale is going to be minor because 1, 4, and 5 are the same tonality as the key from which the progression was formed. Basically, 1, 4, and 5 are the same tonality as the key. We're in the minor scale, so our 1 chord will be minor. Start on that 5th fret. Our next note is going to be 2 frets down, a string to the floor. So our 1 chord is 5th fret on E, 3rd fret on the A string, ring and pointer. Next, we're going to the 3 chord, which takes place on the 8th fret of the low E string. 1, 2, 3. 3, 6, and 7 are the opposite tonality as the key. So we're in the minor key, which means 3, 6, and 7 are going to be major. So our 3 chord is going to be major because it's the opposite of the key. Minor key, major 3 chord. To make our 3 chord major, we start on the 8th fret with our middle finger. Our top note is going to be one fret down, 1 string to the floor. Next we have the 4 chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, which takes place on the 5th fret of the A string. 4 chord is going to be minor because 1, 4, and 5 are the same tonality as the key. To make our 4 chord minor, we play the 5th fret of A paired with the 3rd fret of the D string. Next we have the 6 chord. 4, 5, 6. The 6th chord is going to begin on the 8th fret of the A string. 6th chord is going to be major because 3, 6, and 7 are the opposite tonality of the key. We're in the minor scale, that means our 6th chord will be major. To make the 8th fret of the A string major, we would start with our middle finger. That note is going to be accompanied by the 7th fret of the D string. So from the 8th fret, we drop 1 fret and 1 string to the floor to make that note major. 8 on A, 7 on the D string is our 6th chord. So to put that together, we have 1, 3, 4, 6, minor, major, minor, major. I know when to do the major or minor chord shape because of the intervals and key. We are focusing on when a chord in a progression is major or minor. Later, you'll learn how to replace these small chords with all kinds of other more interesting shapes. But before you can worry about that, it's best to understand how major and minor chords fit together in one key. From there, you can learn various ways to express those different intervals as major or minor. For example, I could go through our progression with different chords. That's a bit poppy, or I could do a reggae version. 1, 3, 4, 6. The same progression can be played in terms of heavy metal. Or funk. Or a dramatic ballad, for example. At this point, your goal is to create as many different progressions as possible. You'll eventually start memorizing the chord progressions. Once this information is internalized, you'll be able to start improvising. Once you're comfortable creating a basic chord progression, then replacing the fifths with major or minor chord shapes, you can begin thinking about other chords, like bar chords, for example. Those chords are going to replace the ones we've learned today. So instead of doing these small chords, learn much bigger chords. To get the most out of this lesson, begin with a power chord progression. And then figure out what intervals you've used and whether those intervals are major or minor. And then replace the power chords with our major or minor shape depending on that interval. All we're studying is how chords move within the major and the minor key, and when those chords in those keys are major versus minor. Later, we'll learn many different ways to express chords as major or minor. There are many. We're just starting with the simplest.
Stop asking me why you love me. Just love me the way that you love me. Stop thinking that I don't love you. I love you. You know I say it a million times. When we argue, do you mean the mean and nasty things you say? Like you're leaving, but it's funny how you just can't stay away. Sometimes I think it's over. Sometimes I think you wish it were true. Sometimes I wish you never say the things you say, 'cause it's pushing me away, so far away. He loves me not, she loves me not. And if you love me, stop asking me about my love. He loves me not, she loves me not. And if you love me, stop asking me about my love. Today we're happy, we're so happy. It seems like everything will be okay. But tomorrow there'll be sorrow and tears rolling down my face. When we argue, do you mean the mean and nasty things you say? Like you hate me, 'cause that's a word you just can't take away. Sometimes I think it's over. Sometimes I think you wish it were true. Sometimes I wish you never say the things you say, 'cause it's pushing me away, so far away. loves me not. She loves me. She loves me not. And if you love me, stop asking me out. My love, my love, my love. He loves me. He loves me not. She loves me. She loves me not. And if you love me,